Hello, everyone. This is Stacy. Welcome to The Landing. Welcome back to The Landing. As you know, throughout this month, we are sharing selections from the Core Sound Waterfowl Museum and Heritage Center's Oral History Collection, preserving the voices, memories, and experiences of the people who call Down East home. In this episode, we invite you to listen to the stories of Margaret Daniels of Williston, North Carolina. Known by many as one of Down East's finest storytellers, Margaret reflects on the powerful hurricanes that shaped both the landscape and the lives of those who endured them. From Hurricane Hazel to Bertha, Floyd, and Isabel, she shares firsthand memories of preparing for the storms, weathering their impact, and witnessing the resilience of her community in the aftermath. Margaret's interview was conducted by Bonnie Hunter on July 19, 2018, as part of the In Harm's Way collection. Through her vivid recollections and unmistakable Down East voice, Margaret reminds us that history is not only found in dates and documents, but also in the stories passed from one generation to the next.
Okay, I am here today with Margaret Daniels at the Core Sound Waterfowl Museum and Heritage Center, and it's the 6th day of May 2016. And we're going to be talking to Margaret, I am going to be talking to Margaret about hurricanes in this area and her experience with hurricanes in this area. Okay, Margaret, can you tell us where you were born and where you grew up?
Well, I was born in Carteret County. I grew up down east, started at Cedar Island, and then when I was 6 years old, we moved to Williston because most of Daddy's family lived there, and it was closer to Cherry Point. And I grew up in Williston, and I live in Smyrna now. I haven't moved very far one way or the other. I prefer staying down east. You know, I'm a retired nurse. I worked 40 years as a nurse. And when you're a nurse...
Did you work here as a nurse?
I started out at Sea Level Hospital, and then I did some private duty and some work at Carteret General. And when Snug Harbor opened, I worked there for a total of 18 and a half years. Then I went to Morehead City and decided I wanted to be in management. That was the biggest mistake I ever made in my life. I was director of nurses, and I didn't realize that when you become director of nurses, you end up being the parent of every employee. So my knees finally gave away and I retired. But being a nurse, you don't have the luxury of being able to evacuate. If you're dedicated to your job, your patients, you just don't have that luxury. If the facility you're working at, especially a nursing home, isn't going to evacuate, they need and expect every employee in there. And most facilities in this area will encourage the employees to bring their families, because that's one way of getting them in there. So after I was grown, I never was home until after I retired. And then the first one I had was Isabel, and I wished I was back at work.
You mean you were never home during the storm?
A storm. Now, as a child, the first storm I remember was, I think it was probably Hazel. We lived in an old house in Williston, and when I say old, it was old, one of the oldest houses there. And when the wind was blowing during Hazel, that house, I was upstairs, it was swaying back and forth. You could see the walls moving, and that's probably saved us. But what got me was, I love breakfast. And I love sausage. And we always had a full breakfast. So the morning that hazel hit in that night and it was still going on, Mother cooked breakfast, just like always. And we were sitting at the table, and the chimney fell through the roof right in my plate. Ruined my breakfast. I'd never been so upset in my life. It didn't.
How, was the electricity still on?
No.
So how did she cook breakfast?
She had a gas stove. A lot of people.
Propane, I guess.
Yeah, a lot of people down east especially still use gas because you're going to lose electricity. You're just going to. You know, so that was probably the first. And the tide came up and it came around the house. It didn't come in, almost. And
How far were you from the shore normally?
I probably a good tenth to a half a mile. But it flooded everything with a hazel. But it didn't flood it as bad as what Isabel and Irene did. But after the tide went down, I won't ever forget this man from Marshallburg, Mr. Claude Brown. He was going around everybody's houses asking if he could go pick up their pears and apples that had blown off the trees. And I thought that was just so strange. I was young. I'm thinking, what? you know, who wants them salty soaked apples and pears? Go, Mother said, go right ahead. I ain't going to use them. So he had an old salt sack loaded on his back, walking around picking up pears and apples. And every storm, you have some memories of it. The ones in Morehead City, when I was working in Morehead City, they were real interesting storms in that, let's see, the one that stands out the most was Floyd. We lost power in Morehead, naturally. But then our generator quit also. And I mean, that is not good when you got 93 patients and about that many staff and family. And you don't have nothing. And you realize you got 5 flashlights. Mm-hmm. So I called the police department and asked them if they could get in contact with Williams Hardware. And could they bring us some flashlights? And God bless them, they went out in the middle of this storm and they bought us every flashlight they had in that building. But our maintenance person happened to be a female. And she called the guy that worked on the generator. Well, he come, and God bless his heart, he was so old, I was scared for him to be out there. I knew he was going to get blowed over. I said, Marilyn, can't we find somebody a little younger? Maybe? He went back, he lived in Crab Point. He went back to Crab Point, out in the field, and got a fuel pump, that's what was matter, off his tractor, and bought it and put it back on our generator so we would have lights. That was the nicest thing I'd ever seen. But I was so scared that he was going to get blowed over, And then I get a phone call from our district manager. She is in Greenville. And obviously they are a lot worse off than us because they're surrounded by water. Literally surrounded by water. And she wants to know if I can get a trailer truck load of stuff to care to her. My response was, have you lost your mind? It's blowing 110 miles an hour here, Karen. Do you really think that I can get to Greenville with a trailer truck? Where would I get this stuff? She said, well, you can let us have some of yours. I said, not today, I won't. I've got to have it myself. I thought I'll be fired over this. I said, well, people just, but that was interesting. And then I was at Snug Harbor. And Snug Harbor has never evacuated. I don't care how bad.
And Snug Harbor is
it started out as a retirement home for merchant seamen. They moved from Staten Island, New York to sea level. And now it is open to the public. It's more of a retirement nursing assisted living. You know, it's a wonderful place. It's just magical. But so I had packed my clothes and went on to Snug Harbor.
And about what year was that?
What? Isabel, I think it was 2003 or 2004. Because it was right after I had quit Moorhead and started working back at Snug Harbor. And if you've got to be stuck in a nursing facility, well, during a storm, the best place to be is Snug Harbor. Because they always have good beds and rooms that you can sleep and good food. You know, and they used to have good liquor, but they quit giving that out.
Oh, no, they haven't. They're still doing it.
Oh, I know they still do, but this was to the staff. So, I had worked the night shift, and I went to bed, and I was in on Hamilton wing, which is farther going towards sea level, close to the marsh. And I woke up, I don't know, 1 or 2 o'clock. And I got up, opened the curtains, and looked out. And now I've heard of tidal surges. I've seen tidal surges on television, but I had never seen an actual tidal surge. Now, grant you, it was only 3 or 4 feet, but it looked like it was 100 feet to me. But it took me a minute to realize, what in the world is that moving towards us? You know, and it struck me, had the stupid thing, I started walking backwards. I didn't have sense to turn around and get out of there. I was walking backwards, amazed with it. And it stopped a foot all the way around that building. Well, by the time I got out of the room and got over to what the healthcare center, we used to call that the infirmary, and you'll hear me say that instead of the healthcare center. You know, they had got the cars moved out the parking lot because the tide came in. And I went and walked on one of the porches they have. And I'm not lying, Bonnie. The seagulls were diving for shrimp that was in the parking lot. I was just mesmerized. I couldn't believe it. And about that time, here comes this boat floating by. It was a big skiff. We don't know where that came from. It came through the marsh.
Yeah.
Here it came. But I went back inside.
So the water must have been totally surrounding that building?
Uh-huh. Totally.
And it's a big building.
Yes, it is very big. It was totally surrounded. And like I said, it only lacked about a foot coming in. You know, years ago, when we first opened, and we had a hurricane, and sea level had evacuated, and they were trying to get everybody down east evacuated, and Snug Harbor said no. So here come the news people. And Dr. Best was there. A very beloved doctor down east. Everybody who hears that name knows him. Anyway, they were interviewing him, and they said, well, what are you going to do if the water comes in the building? He said, take care of the patients. We can wade through water. You know, it's not ever going to be that high that we can't take care of the patient. We'll just wade through the water. And they turned and looked at us nurses, and we said, wade through the water. May not want to, but we'll wade through the water. But anyway, I was sitting there in that solarium where the staff was, and they were looking at, and there was 3 of them on cell phones. We'd already lost power, but they still had cell phone power. And there was 2 of them stood out. They were talking to their parents, and both sets of parents was in Stacy. And they had climbed up into the attic. And one set was so scared of heights, but even more scared of water and drowned. And I was sitting and listening to them trying to calm their parents down. And it struck me, you know, I probably haven't got a house anymore. And my dogs were probably drowned. but at least my parents are not stuck in an attic. That hurt my feelings so bad and had such an effect on me. And then all of a sudden, they lost cell power. And it was just pure agony. You could see the agony on their faces. So somebody got a hold of the sheriff's department to see if there was any way they could get deputies to find out what was going on there. Well, one deputy who had been in Atlantic and sea level, he went up onto the high-rise bridge to see if he could get to Stacy, and he come back and he said, I have never seen anything like this in my life. He said, everything in Open Ground Farms has to be flying by. He said, it's got to be going 60 or 70 miles an hour. Trees, tree trunks just flying across the road. He said, there's just no way anybody can get across that. So we knew we were kind of marooned. We were stuck.
Yeah.
Not knowing anything. But by late afternoon, after it was all, the storm had passed on off, they were able to hear from their parents and know that they were okay. They had gotten down out the attic. There was just one nursing assistant didn't hear from her husband. And all that night we didn't hear from her husband, and he was in sea level. And that next morning still had not heard nothing. Nobody had seen him. Nobody could find him.
And sea level got hit hard.
They got hit very hard. Stacy, sea level got devastated. And we were feeding the residents when he walked in. And I think every one of us had tears in our eyes. He had been trying to keep the water out of the house, and there was just no way. I mean, it was at least, he said, at least 6 foot in the house had come in. And where he lived in sea level, I can understand that. I mean, that there are certain areas of sea level, it was just unbelievable how much water came in there, you know. So, and Irene was a little bit different. I was no longer working anywhere, so I was home. That probably is not a good idea when you live by yourself and you're used all your life to being with a crowd of people, making sure everything's okay. You have something always to do. Well, when you're home by yourself, the only thing you can do is pace back and forth. My poor old dogs, they were just so upset, and it wasn't because of the storm. It's because I wouldn't sit still. I mean, I was up and down, pacing back and forth, looking out the door, looking out the window. Well, the worst of the storm came naturally in the middle of the night, like they seem to always do. So I went to bed, finally told myself there's not a thing you can do to stop this, Margaret. You know, your days of being in control is over with. You might as well just give it up. So I went to bed. But I woke up by 5 o'clock. And I know they had said that it was supposed to have torrential rain. So when I opened my front door, I said, wow, I've never seen this much rainwater. So it was kind of calm. I walked out on the front porch. And I was standing there looking at the water, you know. And all of a sudden, I saw this leaf go by. And I said, this is not rainwater. This is tide water. So I knew the water had come up around the house. I didn't know how much. I started looking to see, you know. So I finally realized, well, it didn't come in the house. I went to the kitchen and was standing to the kitchen window when what floats by but a life preserver. A life preserver. And I'm standing there and I looked at that and I finally said, Lord, I get your message. I'm going to get it. I may need it. And to this day, I have that life preserver tied to a tree. I said, I just could not, but a yellow life preserver goes floating by. I said, now where did that come from? You know,
what do people do after the storm? I mean, I imagine there's a lot of stuff to clean up out of your yard, and in some cases out of your house. What's that like?
Oh, I hate that part of it. Because when you have no current, so it's hot and it's stuffy. And you've got to go get all these limbs and these leaves and these pine cones and anything else. And 9 times out of 10, if you live anywhere near the water, somebody's docks in your front yard or in your road. You know, you just love all these docks that comes by. My daddy used to say, we're going to build a house one day, Margaret, and we're going to go get a boat and go over to Atlantic Beach and collect all that lumber that's in the ocean from where these houses is blown down and stored. But it's just non-stop tiring work that you do it because you need to do something, hoping eventually that the current will come on so you'll get some relief. Because you can't take a shower, you can't take a bath. If you're lucky enough, you've got water and all this stuff stocked up. But, you just clean up and wait. And as soon as the power gets back on, you try to get back to your normal life. You know, it's rough. You know, people who live in this area, we know to always make sure we have plenty of water. I mean, you can put water in anything. And I'll give you a prime example. My brother, God bless his heart, he lives in Maryland. He is useless during storms. Well, when they had that 3-foot snowstorm this winter, he called me right before it was already snowing. He said, they tell us to put water in the bathtub. I'm not going to drink that water out of the bathtub. I said, Ray, you can bathe with it, or better yet, you can flush your toilet with it. Oh, I never thought of that. I thought, Lord, help my soul. Don't want him nowhere around me. He ain't no good. But it's just tiring. You know.
So what do you do to prepare for a storm? Of course, you were never at home.
I was never at home, and I'm unfortunately one of the ones that I don't prepare very good because I never had to do it before. You know, I knew I wasn't going to come home for 3 days. Why would I want to stock up on anything?
Right.
But, you get water, you try to get snacks and stuff, you try to get bags of ice because you know you are going to lose current, and try to save that little bit of food that you got in your refrigerator and freezer and stuff. And go get a little propane bottle so you can cook. If you got a gas grill. You know, I used to have a gas grill, but I let that rust away, so I just eat sandwiches. You know, or I eat out of a can, whatever. I don't worry about, that. You know, all these people goes buys all this, like hot dogs and hamburgers and all this stuff. Don't they know that stuff's going to spoil? It's just no fun. And I'm to the age now, I have never in all my life ever considered leaving Carter County, down east especially. But I'm to the point in my life, this is just no fun anymore. Having to worry about a hurricane.
So you think you might evacuate?
There's a possibility, yes, if it's strong enough. Now
what category would be strong enough for you?
I'm probably a 4 or 5. 100, 110, 120 mile an hour winds, I don't pay no attention to them. I just don't pay any attention to them. It's just a strong mallet blow. Hope your roof stays on. One year, it was Bertha. I had gone to Virginia, and I was giving a lecture, and I had been staying with friends that night. And when I got up the next morning, because it was their facility I was going to, we listened to the weather, because depending on where Bertha was, she couldn't make up her mind what to do. If she was going to hit in, I was going home. Well, she had gotten stalled in South Carolina, off the South Carolina coast. So I said, well, I'll go ahead and do the seminar. So I left about 3 o'clock, Richmond, Virginia. Did not bother to check the weather. Didn't know the Bertha was on the move, heading right to me. So I was going along, and every once in a while, and I got to North Carolina, I was noticing, this is kind of windy. But I was far enough up north, I didn't even think about Bertha. In fact, I forgot there was even a hurricane supposed to hit in. Well, I got into Kinston, and it was blowing hard. When I got to Bridgeton, I pulled off onto a convenience store and got some gas and went in. And I said, how come it's so windy? They said, ma'am, don't you know there's a hurricane heading right to us? I said, oh my word. They said, where are you going? And I told them, they said, you cannot leave from here. You got to stay here. I said, no, I'm going home. No, ma'am, it's too dangerous. I said, I'm going home. I had a pickup truck. So, that was going to do a lot of good. Off I head. And the Trent River Bridge, it was an old bridge. When I got onto that, I'm not a praying person, or I wasn't. But Lord, I talked to the Lord that day, and I wasn't cussing him either. I was praying. The waves were washing over my truck. And there was a car in front of me and a car behind me, so there was nowhere for me to go but forward. I've never been so scared in my life till I got on the other side in the Newbern. And I pulled off and I sat there. I said, I cannot stay in this truck and weather this hurricane. I've either got to find shelter or head home. Get out of here. So I head home. And I go down, I get to Cherry Point, and I said, well, I'm going down 101, because I know the bridge to Moorhead's closed. I wasn't even thinking about the Core Creek Bridge. I forgot about it. So, I get close to the Core Creek Bridge, and it's blocked off. And I'm looking around, and there's nobody. I moved the barricade, pull my truck up, put the barricade back, go on over that bridge very slowly, and did the same thing to the other end. I was determined to get home. So, got into the woods there, and I run up with DOT and their chainsaws. There was trees everywhere, all over the roads. And they said, ma'am, what are you doing here? I'm trying to get home. Oh, where'd you come from? Richmond, Virginia? They said, didn't you go through that barricade? I said, yeah, I did go through it. Don't you know you weren't supposed to do that? I said, look, I'm here. Let's not even discuss what I shouldn't have done. What are we going to do? They said, follow us. So I had to follow them. It took me from Cherry Point to Smyrna. It took me 3.5 hours.
And that's what?
30 minutes.
Right.
45 minutes. So when I pulled in the lane there to Tusk, I thought, oh my God, my house is gone. Because there was the biggest pecan tree laying across that little lane it's ever been. I parked my truck, now you won't see me try and climb over that pecan tree, and it was about 5 feet in the air. I was clambering over it. My house, there wasn't a leaf in the yard. It didn't look like there'd been anything going on in my house, but that pecan tree was there. I mean, not a twig, no leaves. I thought, this is just so strange. But that's just, I'm stubborn. I'm crazy is what it is. But that's my experiences.
Was Isabel the worst storm down east?
Since the 33 hurricane. And my mother used to tell me about that. She lived in Cedar Island, and their house floated off the blocks about a half a mile. That was, and what it is I guess where the tides and winds breaks through the banks, there's nothing to stop the water then from coming in. And that happened with Isabel, and it happened with Irene.
And I guess it depends on whether the tide is high when the
yeah, well, it's high, what direction the wind's blowing and stuff like that.
Well, with Isabel, how has that affected the Down East communities?
As far as I'm concerned, it changed the whole picture of Down East. You got houses that are on blocks now, high up in the air. They look foreign and alien, especially when you go through Stacy. You know, you got all the older structures, it's all gone. There's nothing that looks familiar. Even when I drive down there today, it just is changed completely. It just don't look right.
And there are a lot of houses when you drive through Stacy that look like they're abandoned. And
they are abandoned, a lot of abandoned houses that never got raised up, never got fixed, you know.
So were those ones that were damaged in the hurricane, and then people just...
They didn't have insurance, FEMA didn't help them enough, and so they just gave up on them and moved somewhere else, you know, away from the water. And you can find lots of places in Carteret County to live, even down east, that you're not right on the water, that you have less of a chance to be flooded. You know, unfortunately, I happened to buy a house that's only 500 feet from a creek. It looks like a mud hole, but it's still a creek. But, you know, yeah, it just changed everything. It just don't look like down east I used to know, you know.
But your house hasn't been damaged by any of those hurricanes?
Nope. It's come up around it and under it, but it hasn't damaged it. You know, and I guess I live on a little bit higher spot. One of my best friends lives a 1/10 of a mile down the road towards Marshburg from me. And they get 5 and 6 feet of water. And like I said, it's spitting distance. And I just don't understand it. I'm grateful that it's them, not me. I'm sorry it's them, you know, but I couldn't take that. My house is not as high as theirs, but it's on higher ground, you know.
And it's funny because a lot of places it doesn't look like it's high. It looks looks just as flat as...
Yep, that's the way mine is. But, you know, the tide has never gone any further than I have a wire fence on one side of my house, and it's never come up any further than that. And I would put my car in my neighbor's yard, but he's the one with all the pecan trees, and I really don't want to take that chance. And that's another thing down here. We have to move our vehicles to keep them from flooding.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not, in this day and age, it's not, you can't just park it on the shoulder of the road, and there's no guarantee it's going to be there, or what condition it's going to be in when you get to it. You know, so you have to find people, you know, can I park my car in your yard until the storm's over with? You know, and people who move in this area need to realize that, we just need a place to put our car.
Right. Do people help each other?
Yeah, they do. Churches especially, but people help each other. You get a group of people, and you'll go sometimes from house to house clearing up brush and limbs and stuff, or helping them move stuff out, or trying to give them stuff, or cooking them something. We've always done that. Not as much as we used to, but it's still there. You know. I mean,
do you ever get help from people from other places?
Yes, we do. Again, your churches, they have crews that come down, and they help rebuild houses and put roofs on, the siding on, whatever is painted, whatever is needed. And they'll do that right on up 3 or 4 months after the storm, trying to help get the stuff back to normal. That's just a good thing. Because a lot of people don't have flood insurance. You can't. That's very expensive. They don't make it easy for you. No.
Well, do you have anything else to add? Any other stories?
Oh,
about
I'm certain if I thought hard enough, Bonnie, you know me, I could add a lot more stories. But no, that's enough for today.
Feel free.
No, I figured that's enough for today. It ain't none as funny as my softball story, but
Okay, well, thank you very much,
you're welcome.
Margaret.
Thank you for asking me.
I appreciate it.
Yep.
So I guess we're done for today.
Yeah.
Thank you again for joining us to The Landing. This podcast is brought to you by the Core Sound Waterfowl Museum and Heritage Center. Tune in next week as we continue learning, sharing, and remembering together. If you'd like to hear more, check out our previous episodes where you get your podcasts. If you or someone you know is interested in being on The Landing, please reach out through the link in the description. Until then, stay safe and be kind.